people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. The fallout from this weekend's Kim Clavel versus Jessica Plata unification match in the women's light flyweight division, and what Kim Clavel's promoter had to say about it post-fight. Yvonne Michelle of Group Yvonne Michelle was quoted as saying, "There's no way Plata will make more money waiting for Bermudez than facing Clavel in a rematch. So if Yvonne Michelle wants the rematch, it's very possible the rematch will happen April 21st. It's not all over for Kim." For those not aware, former unified light flyweight champion of Argentina, Evelyn Bermudez, is set to take on Mexico's own unbeaten Tania Enriquez for what is the newly vacated IBF title, the title that Evelyn lost to Yo Costa Valle in her last fight alongside the WBO. Yo Costa decided she would move down from light flyweight back down to minimum weight, where she holds the IBF and WBO titles as well. She vacated the two titles she had won from Evelyn Bermudez at light flyweight. It appears that Evelyn Bermudez is going to get a second crack at becoming a world champion. And that's what Yvonne Michelle's talking about. He's basically saying that the most lucrative option for Jessica Plata moving forward isn't a unification match with the winner of that fight. The most lucrative option would be giving Kim Clavel a rematch, and I happen to agree with him. She got a fair decision in the first fight, right? Right. No funny business on the scorecards. It's not often that the judges' scorecards are turned in and fight fans don't get into an uproar over the cards not reflecting the actual contest. There was no home cooking here. It was a fair decision. Running it back with Kim Clavel, who Jessica Plata, in the eyes of most, beat decisively. Running it back with Kim might very well be the biggest bang for your buck fight for Jessica moving forward. Will she do it? She might. And if she does, the question then becomes, can Kim Clavel actually win the rematch? Her promoter and her team, they can get her the second fight, but they can't fight the fight for her. What does Kim need to do differently in a second fight that she didn't do in the first? She should stop selling out, for one thing. Stop getting into exchanges. Stop getting sucked into a war where Jessica Plata can effectively use her power mid-range to inside. Kim Clavel was too quick to oblige Jessica. Too quick to trade with her. Now that she's felt her power firsthand, she can't afford to make those mistakes again. I went with Kim Clavel to win a points decision this weekend on the premise that she would use her head movement, upper body movement, her agility, her mobility, her quickness. I went with Kim Clavel to win on points this weekend on the premise that she would box Jessica Plata as opposed to going to war with her. That's not what happened. Every single time in the build-up I talked about this fight, I stressed the importance of Kim not spending too much time in the pocket and not being greedy with her combinations, because Jessica could catch her between the shots, catch her between the punches, and for my money, Jessica was the bigger puncher. I was right to assume that, though wrong to assume that Kim would work around Jessica's power. She played into it. She played right into Jessica's hands. What does she have to do differently in the second fight that she didn't do in the first? For starters, she can stop selling out, stop getting into exchanges with Jessica. By now, she has to know those exchanges, they don't favor her. She's got to be tricky. She's got to be trickier the second time out. Give Jessica different looks, change levels, use feints. Work off the counter instead of initiating exchanges that don't favor her. Make her miss and make her pay. Peck away at her. 1 and 2 punches at a time, 1 and 2 shots at a time, and no more. With a big emphasis on slipping, bobbing, weaving, and rolling punches. Clavel's range of motion is her best weapon in this fight, more than strength of arms. She hit Jessica with everything she had. She hit her with everything but the kitchen sink, and she couldn't put a dent in her. Jessica took Kim Clavel's best punches and just smiled. shrug them off.
Kim can't hurt her.
Jessica Neri Plata beat Kim Clavel for the same reason she beat Jessica Tutibap before her. Jessica Tutibap, the Argentinian legend, the Argentinian slugger who punch for punch is a much bigger puncher than Kim Clavel. She couldn't put a dent in Jessica, so Kim.
You can fucking forget it.
Kim's not a big puncher. Her best attribute is her athleticism and quickness, not her firepower.
If Jessica Bob couldn't hurt Jessica Neri Plata, Kim Clavel won't hurt Jessica Neri Plata, and she found that out the hard way.
Jessica's power is deceptive. It goes back to what I always tell you guys, that there's more to boxing than what you see on paper. With Jessica, she only has 3 recorded knockouts, just 3.
And on paper, she may not seem like she's not that big a puncher, but to watch her in action, it's clear that she has serious pop.
As stated, Kim Clavel, she's got to work around that power instead of feeding into it.
Don't jab your way into striking distance, giving Jessica something to counter.
Instead, ease your way in with head movement, slipping Jessica's jab.
Fire your counter.
And mind left hook, mid-range to inside. Kim Clavel took quite a few of those.
That's what I mean when I say instead of initiating all those exchanges, peck away at Jessica.
Don't sell out. You can't afford to.
Keys to success for the rematch. Head movement, upper bounty movement, counter punching.
In and out game. Kim Clavel spent far too much time in this fight being the one coming forward. She just ain't got the firepower for that kind of fight.
I mean, maybe with somebody else, but not with Jessica.
Adjustments need to be made. Kim needs to be more economic and defensively responsible in the second fight than she was in the first. Easier said than done, I know, but isn't everything. We'll see if Yvonne Michelle doesn't make this rematch happen. Men's lightweight news. Devin Haney posted this to his social media. Caption, 2 emojis, pay-per-view.
Must have been a change of plans.
Bob Arum initially indicated that he would like to put the Lomachenko versus Haney fight on regular ESPN, but it appears that there could be a change of plans and the fight may be going down in May.
I vaguely recall Devin Haney wanting the fight to go down before Ramadan. It appears that it's set to go down after, and some compromises must have been reached.
My thoughts. This change of plans, the fight being billed as a pay-per-view as opposed to a regular ESPN fight, in truth, I don't mind it. I said it before, and I'll say it again. If they bill it as a pay-per-view, this is the kind of fight that I'm willing to pay for, and I stand on that. I stand by those statements.
Devin Haney's second defense of his undisputed crown at lightweight, his first being the second George Kambosos fight in Australia.
George was the champion in the first.
He got beat, and Devin was the champion in the second.
And he's the champion now, the defending champion, ahead of this Vasyl Lomachenko showdown, years in the making. The back and forth between the factions of fans, the Devin Haney fans, the Lomachenko fans, and now the fight is finally here.
It's not officially announced, but it's only a matter of time.
This is what you want. A high-level, high-stakes title fight involving all the titles in the men's lightweight division, not secondary titles, baby belts, or Mickey Mouse championships.
For all the marbles.
No smoke and mirrors necessary. This satisfies what I want as a boxing fan and what kind of box office fight I'm willing to pay for. Vasyl Lomachenko versus Devin Haney is an intriguing enough fight.
But yeah, I'd pay for that.
But what could have sparked the change of plans? If Bob Arum initially wanted to bill this as a regular ESPN fight, what could have led to them billing it as a pay-per-view instead? And I have no doubts it might be to satisfy the financial demands of the fighters. I mean, I'm just bouncing ideas around. But Devin Haney wanted this fight to go down before Ramadan. As it stands, it's going to end up happening afterwards. So maybe to get him to play ball, they promised him more money. And maybe their methodology to get him more money is to bill it as a box office fight as opposed to just a regular ESPN fight.
Give him more money. Get him to play ball.
Where's the money supposed to come from? The upside of a pay-per-view, presumably.
But as stated, I'm all right with that. I love the fight.
Keys to success for the fighters. Devin Haney has a respectable lightweight resume, having shared the ring with former champions like Jojo Diaz and Jorge Linares.
Current reigning Unified Ring Magazine and lineal champion in George Kambosos.
Got a respectable resume, though Vasyl Lomachenko really is a far cry from those fighters, a far cry from those guys. He's more malleable, more versatile, more proven than any one of them. So Devin Haney will have his work cut out for him in May.
What's he got to do?
Keep a cool head in order to keep control and keep the fight at his pace. Slow the fight down, because what Vasyl Lomachenko likes to do is force a guy to work by upping the tempo.
Upping the pace.
And in doing so, The man opposite the ring, Vasyl Lomachenko, ends up burning through his energy reserves. It's what we saw in the Jermaine Ortiz fight late last year.
Devin's got to mind his footing, mind his feet, and turn with Vasyl Lomachenko as he pivots, as to not allow Vasyl Lomachenko to hit him in the blind spots.
Because when he pivots, that allows Vasyl Lomachenko to attack his opponent from different angles. Thus, Devin has to turn with him as he pivots to keep the target in front of him and keep Vasyl Lomachenko out. Keep him at the end of his punches, the end of his jab, keep him at arm's length, and keep the fight at a steady pace.
Can he do it?
There's only one way to find out. The keys to success for Devin is to keep control of the tempo and the pace and the space at which the fight is being fought. It's the exact opposite for Vasyl Lomachenko.
His keys to success.
He has to up the tempo, up the pace, force Devin Haney to work. For the longest time, there's been widespread speculation that Devin is struggling to make 135 pounds because he's a young guy whose body is still growing, and he's been at lightweight for some time now. You push the pace on this guy.
Might burn out the same way Jermaine Ortiz burned out.
Jermaine Ortiz, who started off all right in the early goings of the match, he was able to keep up with and keep on top of Vasyl Lomachenko. But as the fight progressed, you noticed he was slowing down. You noticed his output was decreasing.
Started getting tagged. Started getting hit clean. Really clean.
As soon as he got tired, Vasyl Lomachenko has to force Devin Haney to fight. Force him to work in order to wear him out, because Vasyl Lomachenko, unlike Devin Haney, he's not struggling to make lightweight, but Devin might be.
If he is, that's an advantage.
Devin Haney may be the younger, fresher, and bigger fighter, but he's not the bigger puncher.
Or the more prolific one.
Loma's getting up there in age. He's not getting any younger. In truth, none of us are, but he's got to go to the well for this one and up the tempo. Punches in bunches. Devin Haney, being a characteristically economic puncher that wants to fight at a more controlled pace, he's not an action fighter. Vasyl Lomachenko is.
And it behooves him to stay in character for this fight.
Punches in bunches, that's the ticket. Punches in bunches to where you force Devin Haney to either move or respond. And when he responds, that's when you can nail him.
He's made that mistake before. He made that mistake with Jorge Linares, and he ate a big right hand that had him hurt for a while. It took him a while to recover.
So Lomachenko, unlike Jorge Linares, he's a southpaw. Jorge is an orthodox fighter. Vasyl Lomachenko, being a southpaw, he's going to be moving to his right just on the outside of Devin Haney's jab. And Devin Haney's jab just so happens to be his money punch. I mean, more than a left hook or
a straight right or a right cross.
Devin's best punch, his signature punch, really is his jab.
So Lomachenko jabbing with the opposite hand, that could give Devin some problems.
Vasyl Lomachenko wants to crowd this guy mid-range to inside. Thus, it's on Devin to keep him mid-range to outside.
Well, that breaks down as one guy's trying to close the distance while the other is trying to maintain it.
Devin doesn't have much in terms of inside game. Mid-range to inside, I'd say he's vulnerable. I'd say within close quarters, Vasyl Lomachenko would have the advantage. Thus, it doesn't behoove Devin to fight the fight there.
Devin's more prone to tying up. Devin's more prone to clinching mid-range to inside than fighting.
Interesting dichotomy that the keys to success for the individual fighters just so happen to be the opposite of what the other guy wants. Where Vasyl Lomachenko might want to be close to Devin, Devin might want Loma to stay at arm's length, keep him out.
I think Loma's the bigger puncher.
Whereas Devin might be slightly faster, slightly sharper.
So he's never had his engine tested by a guy like this.
Guy who seems to get stronger as a fight progresses.
So as luck would have it, we have this to look forward to in late May.
I got no horse in the race. I just love the fight.
Devin Haney, the reigning undisputed lightweight champion, also addressed certain comments being made by his contemporaries, Ryan Garcia, Gervonta Davis, and a growing number of individuals who seem to think that alphabet titles don't matter in the sport of boxing.
Devin himself stated, belts never matter when they don't have any.
Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia as a fight, a box office fight, a big one, because it would be.
It's an anomaly in the sport. It's one of few fights, very few fights, that you can stage as a box office fight and get a good turnout.
It's an anomaly.
An exception that allows you to bill a big box office fight without any alphabet titles on the line. And the disconnect is that this applies to every area of the sport, every division and every boxer. There aren't that many fights like this you can stage as box office fights that will get you big box office numbers.
But because Davis versus Garcia don't really feature no full-fledged alphabet titles, there are some out there that think that titles in the sport, they don't matter anymore.
Casuals mostly, who don't realize the role that alphabet titles play in helping to develop fighters and establish fighters who go on to become marquee attractions. I mean, think about it. If not for the IBF title, Kell Brook wouldn't have had any reason to fight Errol Spence Jr., and he could have avoided him the same way that a lot of guys were avoiding him at that time, many years ago.
Mostly his own PBC stablemates.
Before you go thinking that titles don't matter in the sport, do realize that Kell Brook fight for Errol Spence Jr., that was his coming out party. That was the fight where he arrived and established himself as a world-class fighter. And if not for the IBF ordering Kell Brook to defend that belt, it wouldn't have happened.
There's no good reason for Kell Brook to face Errol Spence Jr. straight away, having been beaten at the hands of a prime Gennady Golovkin at middleweight, dropping all the way back down to welterweight.
The only reason he did it was because the IBF ordered him to do it. In defense of what?
In defense of his belt.
So where do you get that belts don't matter? How'd you come up with that bright idea? Is it because Ryan Garcia said so?
Let me tell you something about Ryan.
Ryan Garcia's a flip-flopper. When Devin Haney's got a belt, belts don't matter. But immediately after George Kambosos beat Teofimo Lopez,
Why did he all of a sudden become interesting?
why did fighting him all of a sudden become a priority? Could it have been because he took the belts from Teofimo Lopez? He was more interested in taking the belts away from George Kambosos than he's ever been to share the ring with Devin Haney.
Don't believe the hype.
He's only saying that belts don't matter because Devin Haney's got them. When George had them,
All of a sudden he's fighting George in his comeback fight, and he wants to fight George, and he promises he'll knock out George.
all of a sudden, fighting a guy in possession of most of the alphabet titles at lightweight suddenly, out of the clear blue sky, became an attractive proposition to Ryan. Up until Devin took those belts from George, and suddenly, belts didn't matter anymore.
Don't believe the hype. He only says that so he has an excuse not to fight Devin. He's never wanted to fight Devin.
Irrespective of who you think wins and how, Ryan Garcia has had an obvious aversion to facing Devin Haney. Thus, he's one of the main proponents of that whole belts don't matter argument.
Which is bullshit.
I'm not telling you that the sanctioning bodies are perfect. It's far from a perfect system.
Pretty fucking far from perfect, but in some instances, they do perform an essential function in the sport.
Fights like Davis versus Garcia, fight like that is an anomaly.
More often than not, you actually need this grooming process, the process of pursuing an alphabet title in order to weed out the pretenders.
And establish a hierarchy, an upper echelon, a pecking order.
This goes over the heads of laymen.
If I tell you that there's next to no chance a particular fighter wins an alphabet title in their career, they can't be a very good fighter now, can they?
If you see a guy that says that he doesn't want to,
Well, that's just because he wants to have his pick of the litter.